Following Japan, the final race of the season had been set up in dramatic style, with Lewis 5 points ahead of our Brazilian rival Felipe Massa as we headed on to his home event in Sao Paulo. Yes, hello folks, welcome back to Tales from the Treehouse. Today we're going to be talking about one of the greatest moments in my Formula One career, and I know for many Formula One fans, one of the greatest spectacles in modern Formula One history, maybe even in sporting history. Tell me if you think I'm going too far. Of course, I'm talking about that dramatic day on the final day of the season in 2008 when Lewis, with McLaren, took his first Formula One World Championship. It was a moment that I will never ever forget, a moment that I'll be forever immensely proud of, but a moment that had so many twists and turns in it, and I think the reason I say it's one of the best sporting moments in recent history is that with any live sporting event, what you want is to not know the outcome until right at the end. If it's a football match, you want it to go down to the wire, don't you? You want teams to be scrapping in the 90th minute over who's going to win. And that's what we had in that race in Brazil that particular year, 2008. So let's get into it. One of my favourite days, hopefully for many of you, one of yours as well. All the pressure was on us. After the Friday practice sessions, it became clear we were at a performance disadvantage. Ferrari was stronger than us. Once again, their car better suited to the design of this fast, sweeping, hilly track. We knew if we were to win the race, we'd have to really earn it. There'd be no room for mistakes, nor even a fractional error could be tolerated. And the smallest tactical oversight might be enough to hand the trophy to the red team. Now, going into this race, we knew we had a points advantage. So, yes, the pressure was on us because the Ferraris were definitely quicker. You know, under normal circumstances, they should absolutely hands down win that race because our car just wasn't suited to the track anywhere near as much. But we didn't need to win it. We didn't need to go all out guns blazing and risk everything to get the win. Ferrari and Felipe Massa absolutely did. We just had to finish fifth. Luckily, we had experience on our side. After the horror show of the previous season, the team was well aware what it would take to win the title under these circumstances. We were sensible, we took deep breaths before making big decisions, and our heads overruled any unduly passionate ideas or theories. Allowing our hearts to control our minds in 2007 had cost us dearly, and we weren't going to repeat those mistakes. So when Massa qualified in pole position with Lewis in fourth place, everybody remained steady. And that was it. I don't remember anybody panicking at that stage. Fourth place was okay. We had to finish fifth on the racetrack if Felipe had won the race. That was absolutely achievable. We had the second fastest car. We had one of the best drivers on the grid. Finishing fourth should have been an absolute walk in the park under normal circumstances. However, as it turned out, there weren't really any normal circumstances that weekend, were they? If you remember, the gods, the weather gods, definitely decided to roll the dice and make everything a lot more tricky than it otherwise would have been. The weather in Sao Paulo could be notoriously aggressive. When it rained, it really rained, and torrential storms often struck without much warning, with squalls of horizontal drops quickly forming treacherous rivers across the undulating track. On the afternoon of the Grand Prix, the Brazilian climate was in typically unpredictable mood, hurling down rain heavily just before 3 p.m. local time, delaying the race start. Now, I remember being sat in the garage that morning, sitting through the meetings about what we would do, how we'd play it, how our strategy would play out, what the weather was looking like, and it didn't look good. And when it started to come down that afternoon, everybody's heart sunk in the garage because this was the worst thing. This is our absolute nightmare. If it had been bone dry, we could have easily finished fourth on the racetrack, but the weather introduced this element of unpredictability, which we knew we'd have to be at the absolute top of our game to be able to manage and to get through it in the best shape possible. It definitely was not what anybody at McLaren wanted that afternoon. When the race got underway, the rain eased and the track began to dry quickly as Massa pulled out a lead from pole position. By lap 11, everyone was back onto dry tyres with Lewis running a comfortable fourth. Now that was great for us. You know, things were starting to swing back in our favour because we had some control over the performance of our car, over our pace in dry conditions. And given that everybody was on the same dry tyres at that point, we felt like we had a level playing field to fight on, and under those circumstances we could absolutely fight. We could do that. We had a car and a driver well worthy of achieving what we needed to achieve. Towards the closing stages though, steady rain fell once more, and everyone except Toyota's Timo Glock made the seemingly obvious choice to dive into the pits for wets again. With Glock gambling on the weather and staying out on dry tyres, he moved up to third, pushing Hamilton and Vettel back into fourth and fifth, respectively. After the pit stops were completed, it was okay. Fifth would still be enough. And that was what we were thinking. We were absolutely targeting a top 5 finish and nothing more, which is not how we'd faced the year before. We were going all out for wins. We were fighting our teammate in 2007. This year, we were doing everything right. We were doing whatever was needed just to get the result that we needed. And a fifth was absolutely okay. We were trying on the radio to keep Lewis calm, to keep him under control, to make sure that he didn't get flustered. And inside the garage, nobody was flustered either. We would look at the conditions, we would take the right decision at the right time as best we thought we could, and that was all we could do. But the rain got worse. It got much, much worse. And inside the garage, at that point, we started to get a bit more concerned. This was not what we needed at all. Even Lewis began to get flustered on the radio. He started to come back, shouting things like, the car's undrivable. You know, Sebastian Vettel, who he was fighting on track at the time, was in much better shape. And that's all Lewis could see, was that his rivals around him were able to handle those conditions better than he was. Lewis is not great sometimes in those circumstances where things don't go well. He starts to panic, he starts to get flustered. And the team, and this is exactly what our team had to do, it's exactly what you see Bono doing at Mercedes right now, putting a lot of work into trying to remain calm on the radio, make sure your voice remains calm, trying to calm the situation down and alleviate any of those worries. So we did that. We told Lewis that, you know, we're fine. We're still in a position that is absolutely okay and enough for us to win the championship. So just keep it on the racetrack, keep going, and do what you're doing. You're doing absolutely fine, is what we told him. As a team, we looked to our drivers for inspiration. Their leadership engaged us behind the scenes, so when somebody like Lewis freaked out a little, we all took notice. After all, nobody understood the car as well as he did. And that was the thing. Whilst we were all trying to remain calm and give off this calm vibe towards Lewis and to those around us to make sure nobody panicked, inside I think we were all absolutely freaking out. This was so close to everybody's dream happening, and yet it was also so close to all of that just disappearing in a moment. A short time later, in the closing stages, the rain came down harder and the balance of the car changed again. Now Sebastian's car really did look much more stable than ours in these wetter conditions, and Lewis, desperate to stay ahead, ran wide with just a lap and a half to go, slipping back one vital spot as a result. We held our breath. Nicole Scherzinger screamed at the back of the garage, and I turned round to see her with her hand over her mouth, staring wide-eyed at the TV. I promise you, that is one of my overriding memories of that last lap, was Nicole Scherzinger screaming so loud that even through my headphones and earplugs and everything else that I had on, I could still hear that ringing in my ears. She was so passionate and so into this, and so into Lewis at the time and wanting him to do well. This was not some showy relationship that they had that lots of people thought it was. She was his biggest supporter, his biggest fan right back then, and she was in a garage full of people that wanted this more than anything. With Lewis now behind Sebastian Vettel, we were sixth. Massa was starting his final lap and was going to win the race. It looked over. The mood in the garage had completely changed from one of tense excitement to sombre disbelief in a moment. And that's true. I mean, we talk about emotional roller coasters in sport probably way too much. It's an overused term. But nothing else describes that last lap better than that does. At one point we were up, we were so high that we were so close to the end of the race, and we were in a position that would give us the world title. And yet a split second later, the driver's panicking on the radio, he's run wide, we're now out of that position. And the championship that we'd worked so hard for all year had just slipped away in that second. Everybody just collapsed in their chairs. I remember slumping in my chair, feeling so gutted and heartbroken in that 1 second. But of course, we still had half a lap to go. We watched as Lewis tiptoed his way round the final lap, pushing as much as he dared, always on the brink of spinning off again. It was horrible. There was no grip at all, but he wasn't giving up and he chased Vettel hard. We could hardly bear to look. I was gripping the edge of my chair so tightly that my hands hurt when I finally let go. There was no way we could pass Vettel in these conditions from this far back. Now, I remember sitting there watching the screens when the mood was at its lowest. In fact, it was at its lowest that I can remember, even more low than it was the year before in 2007, because we were so close. We were a couple of corners away, a few minutes, a few moments away from this huge achievement that not only had Lewis dreamt of since he was a kid, but every single person in that garage had dreamt of since they got involved in Formula One, since they started working for McLaren. And I could also imagine millions of McLaren fans, millions of Lewis Hamilton fans feeling exactly the same way, slumping. Massa crossed the line half a lap ahead of us and took the checkered flag to win the race. He'd done it. We watched him celebrating in his own car and his Ferrari team in their garage. Our hearts sank even further. It was like the life had slipped out of our own garage in that moment and everyone breathed collectively. The pictures turned back to our battle as Lewis balanced his car over the edge of the grip limits right behind Vettel. He was close, but getting past was impossible. Seb was simply faster and more in control. I couldn't quite believe how this could have happened again. No one could. It was such a depressing moment. I can't think of a better way to describe that. It was depressing. So depressing. People had stopped looking at the TV screens because with Massa winning the race and the celebrations going on in the Ferrari camp, it was like it was over. It was like it was a done deal and that was it. There was nothing more that we as a team could do. Lewis, of course, never gave up. He kept scrapping, kept pushing as hard as he could. The engineers were coming on the radio saying, just keep it going, Lewis. Keep your head down. Half a lap to go. Keep it on the circuit. Anything can still happen. I remember Phil Prue, his engineer, saying that. Anything can still happen, Lewis. But I don't think I remember at the time thinking that he even believed that when he said it. He was saying it, in my mind, just to give Lewis something to cling on to, just to keep him going and stop him from wanting to give up. The cars came around the final corner and up the hill towards the line. Vettel 5th and Lewis 6th. Still pushing right to the end, they passed what everyone assumed was a struggling backmarker going incredibly slowly, when suddenly commentator Martin Brundle dropped the bombshell. "Is that Glock? Is that Glock? It is! It's Glock!" he shouted, getting louder and louder with every word. Both commentators went crazy. Timo Glock, who'd earlier taken the massive gamble to stay on his dry tyres rather than make the final pit stop like everyone else, had been running somewhat inconspicuously in the top 5 with all eyes on our battle. But now that the heavens had opened up even more on the last lap, he had absolutely no grip whatsoever, barely staying on the racetrack. Vettel and Hamilton drove past him through the final turn in a heartbeat. We were 5th. It brings full level of emotion back to me right now. I've got goosebumps just reading that because the feeling in that second was just incredible. I mean, I struggle to even describe it properly. It felt like nobody could believe it. It felt like, could it really be? Could it be true? Have they just got this wrong? People were jumping out of their chairs in the garage, but no one quite knew whether that was true or not. Had the commentators just made a mistake? And whilst half of our garage leapt up and ran straight out the garage across to the pit wall, knowing that we were now in that vital 5th position, I couldn't quite bring myself to do it because I couldn't quite believe it could be that simple. From just seconds ago being at the lowest point I'd felt for a long, long time, to all of a sudden seeing the garage burst into life around me, I needed to have it confirmed. So I waited in the garage, watching the screens, having that confirmation. And eventually, yes, they checked, they double checked. We did see the timing screens. We realised Timo Glock was tumbling down the order and we'd now done it. We were now in that vital 5th position. Lewis screamed up towards the line and in the last corner of the last lap of the last race of the season, we'd become world champions. The thing that we only dream of. I'm so lucky to have been part of that process and I know it. And you know, it was a dream for me getting into Formula One in the first place. And then after that, you start dreaming of maybe one day winning a race. And we did that. And then there's the ultimate dream, a dream that so few people ever get to actually realise, of winning a world title in this sport. And we've done it in the most dramatic fashion possible. "Lewis, you're the world champion," came the words over the radio that he needed to hear. Lewis was crying as he keyed his own radio switch on the steering wheel. No words came out. But I remember seeing the moment the Ferrari boys realised the result and how distraught they all were in their garage, and I couldn't help but feel for them. And that's true. You know, I had this moment when I felt so sorry for the guys in the Ferrari garage, because for all that depressive up and down that I just experienced moments earlier, I knew that they were now going through it, perhaps in an even more extreme case, thinking they'd won it. You know, I kind of wanted to go and put my arm around them. Some of those guys were my friends. But, you know, things very quickly had to turn back to our moments. You know, that was our moment in Formula One's history, and we had been a part of it. And the celebrations that came after that were just insane. Leaping around the garage, leaping up onto the pit wall, hugging anybody that was in sight. Again, Nicole was just screaming her head off in the garage. She was leaping around in a bunch of you know, grubby mechanics with her perfectly manicured nails and hair and high heels, the whole lot. She was leaping in, getting fully involved in the melee, which I loved. It was a great experience, a great moment. And seeing Lewis come back and then jump into the arms of his dad, who we'd all, you know, grown to know and love together as a pairing. We knew about their fight, their struggle through the career. To have that moment together was a very special thing to witness. It was an amazing day, perhaps my favourite day in my career because of what we achieved. I had some very special days and very special moments where we had some perhaps more unlikely victories, or some victories out of more adversity than that. But to achieve what we achieved that day was unbelievable. And for somebody as young as Lewis, as inexperienced as Lewis, to know now what he's gone on to achieve perhaps makes me even more proud to have been there right at the start and helped him get his way on that, get through that process and start on his journey like that. So the celebrations that night were insane. I remember Lewis was DJing, Nicole was singing. In fact, Lewis and Nicole sung a duet, if I remember, at the post-race party. And it was just an amazing experience after such intense pressure all season. So much effort that goes in, not just at the races, but for months before that, all the time in between races that you're not seeing on TV. The time, the effort, the commitment, the dedication from us at the racetrack, but also so many hundreds more back at our factory. I cannot tell you the outpouring of emotion that comes out in that second. And as I say, it's something I'll never forget. I remember the bank of photographers lining up at the front of our garage to take pictures, and camera flashes going off in all directions as we lined up as a team. A very special moment. You know, for that instant, you felt like a celebrity with the paparazzi just flashing all over the place. And as I say, we went on to have an amazing night, woke up with an incredible hangover the next morning. But I think the day and that moment, particularly that moment on track, Martin Brundle's line in commentary, "Is that Glock?" You know, just those three words are now iconic. And it reminds us of what is one of the greatest sporting moments that I can remember for a long, long time. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed that one. I hope it brought back some good memories. Certainly did for me. I've got goosebumps just talking about it. But there we go. Another Tales from the Treehouse. I hope you enjoyed it. Drop me a like, and any suggestions that you have for any further episodes, I'd really appreciate that. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and you'll get a lot more of this in the coming days, weeks and months. So for now, thanks very much, and I'll see you soon. Ta-da.